All right, y'all. Welcome back to the show. I got my main man, Wes, here. He is a defense attorney here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Me and him actually met in Tallahassee, became good friends. We were, probably when I was a junior in college, I think that's when we met. But we ended up being roommates together and just had a ton of good memories together. So he's blessed me with his presence to come and tell us a little bit about his life, his career. So I'll turn it over to him just to introduce himself. Wes, just tell us, what you're doing now, where you grew up, a little bit about your childhood, and then, I'll get into it.
All right. First, honored to be here. Thanks for having me. Thanks for asking me to be on the show. Been watching it since you started. I don't know if I'm going to be as good as your last interview guest, Lil B, but I'm gonna do my best.
Okay.
So
tough act to follow.
Yeah, for sure. That's for sure. Like you said, criminal defense attorney. Born and raised in West Palm Beach, actually, which is a little north from where I'm working at right now, which is in Broward. I started my career as a public defender, which a lot of people, the misconception or the I guess the word on the street is public pretender rather than public defender. A lot of people don't think we're real attorneys. A lot of people think that we are, working for the state, or that we're not really, have the best interest for your clients, that we're kind of just, another arm of the state that's kind of meant to just push poor, disadvantaged people through the system. Definitely not the case. Some of the best attorneys, criminal defense attorneys that you've ever heard of started as public defenders, including, the Johnny Cochrans, the Roy Blacks, the David Oscar Marcuses, the best criminal defense attorneys. Most of them started as public defenders. So that's where I started my career. Now work for a private criminal defense firm that does criminal defense in Broward, Miami, and West Palm. Still doing the same type of law, just different kind of clientele, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so what made you want to become an attorney?
So that's funny. My whole life, I was always told that I should either be an attorney or a politician, mainly because, and it was kind of more of a jab than of a real suggestion, because growing up, my teachers, would kind of always point out that, I was smart, but more of a smart aleck.
Yeah.
I like to argue. Yeah. I was very strong-willed. Defiant was a note that was written on my bad notes a lot. Insubordinate was something that was written on report cards a lot. Like, oh, Wesley's got good grades, but he's got, listening skills or listening deficiencies.
There it is.
I always hated math. I knew I was definitely not going to get anything involved in math, but I always liked writing. I did like speaking. I liked advocating, not just for myself, but for other people. And honestly, getting in trouble is kind of what opened my eyes to it. I got in trouble one time when I was in the first time I got in trouble was in high school.
There's
and
levels.
a good friend of mine's father was an attorney, and watching him work on my case for me really opened my eyes to wanting to do it, number one. And number two, after he had done it, I was maybe 18 years old. I thought my whole life was over. I wasn't going to be able to go to college. And the fact that he was able to kind of work it out for me and gave me, in my mind, a second chance to do everything, I always thought that would be awesome. And I would love to do that for other people if given the chance.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm going to assume that's also why you wanted to go into defense?
Yes.
Becoming a defense attorney?
Yes.
Okay.
I want to say that was because I thought criminal defense was probably the most interesting. I didn't know all that what went into it, but I definitely thought it was the most interesting. And then having that brush with it kind of made me even more so push me in that direction. So yeah, I would say that.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, we were roommates in college. Do you remember a time that did we ever get into a big argument? I was just trying to sit here thinking, you've always been argumentative. Yeah. I don't know if we've ever gotten to like a pretty big argument though.
Not a real big. We would get into like, your sports standard
debates and things
sports
like that.
debates,
Yeah.
FIFA game arguments, things like that. But like, I don't think it ever really got too heated because there was always a mutual respect there. On both ends. I think also I was making calculated business decisions as well, in terms of how heated of an argument I wanted to get in with D. I mean, although I was known to be quite a hothead and argumentative and strong-willed and stuff, I like to think not to the point of self-deprecation. Like, I'm not dumb, so yeah. I would certainly know where the line was oftentimes.
Well, hey, you always had my back, though.
Absolutely.
There was a time in college, I think, someone had bumped me in the club, and like Wes was literally like all the way behind everybody in VIP, and next thing you know, he's next to me, ready to stick up, and I'm like, yo, Wes.
Listen, I knew you couldn't handle yourself in that situation. I knew this guy about 6 inches shorter than you might be able to work you over, so I wanted to handle that for you, like I knew you would have done for me. Yeah. I need to clean up your trash for you. That's all.
Nah, man. Dog, I love it. Good times, man. So what would you say is the biggest, I guess, obstacle that you had to overcome on your path to becoming an attorney, whether it be childhood, college, or?
Probably. So we've already discussed the first time I got in trouble, but I would say, I would say my biggest struggle that I had to overcome was, and I'm jumping forward a bit, but this period of time after I got in trouble for the second time, which was in college, I got in trouble for some stuff, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But a lot of people think that it's like this kind of like linear line in terms of like success, that you start out and then you go through something bad, and then at the end of it is like this rainbow of success. And that's not how it worked for me. It was, I got in trouble, I had to overcome a lot. And then I got to this point where I was out of jail, and I had applied to 10 law schools and got 10 rejections.
True.
And I was like, damn, man, I had thought that I had gotten over my biggest hump. I had thought I had, made it out the other end. And now's my time to be, right off into the sunset with my nice career and everything. And it was such a gut punch to think that, because I gave everything I had into taking the LSAT, which is the test that you take before to get into law school, and on the examinations and my personal statement, and I gave everything I could into them. So when I got those 10 rejections, and on top of that, that was the first time that I had not worked since I was 16 years old, because I put everything into studying for that test. And at that time, I was literally effectually homeless. Like, I was from one friend's couch to the next friend's couch to the next friend's couch to the next friend's couch, because I didn't want to overstay my welcome anywhere too long, and just studying for the test. And I was like, okay, this is everything I'm going to do. I'm going to pass it, and then I'm going to move on, and everything's going to be good. And then when I got those 10 rejections, it was like, Jesus Christ, man, is this for me? Is this what I was meant to do? Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe this isn't my thing. Yeah. And it was kind of like, okay, I have no job. I'm homeless, and I can either pivot and join the army or do something else, or try one more time to take this test and get in and push forward. And thankfully I took it the second time and passed and got a scholarship, and we were good from there. But I would say that even more so than going to jail and all of that was bigger, because it was more psychologically just such a gut punch to think that I had tried my hardest and was still failing, even though I thought I was done over the failing stage, if you will.
Yeah. No. So, man. Okay. So you were in jail. What age?
So I was in jail 22, 23. Okay. I had just graduated law school. I was interning at a private criminal defense firm. I just graduated undergrad, excuse me. Yeah. Was interning at a private criminal defense firm, and I was, in all intents and purposes, on the right track to where I wanted to go, in terms of at least what it looked like. I was still, dealing with shit, but in all intents and purposes, I was lined up to do well until I then got arrested. It was a series of getting arrested, actually. I got arrested for the first time right after I got arrested for cocaine possession. And then I was put on a probationary type thing for that. And then after that, a year actually after that, a friend of mine wanted to pull a fraternity prank at a rival fraternity house, and
God.
in my infinite wisdom at that time, thought it was a good idea to join in on that prank, because why would I not? Having only been on probation for about a year at that time, thought like, oh, nothing will come of this because it was just a silly prank. Well, we got hit with 3 felonies: breaking and entering, theft of a fire extinguisher, and felony destruction of property, because they smartly didn't report the crime until several days later, after they had a very big party and everything that got broken there. They said, we did. So my attorney told, well, the prosecutor also happened to be a member of that fraternity at that exact same college after he graduated, or prior to him graduating law school. So that obviously didn't work in my favor.
That I didn't know.
Yeah, that one was a nice little nugget that didn't work out for me so well. But my attorney, who was my boss, because it was the exact same firm that I was interning at, which was obviously very embarrassing, went to the prosecutor and said, look, this guy's not a bad kid. He's obviously made a series of extremely stupid mistakes, but he wants to go to law school. He wants a future. He wants to do something for himself. Can we just not make him a convicted felon, which would essentially negate you? It wouldn't 100%, but it would effectively more like virtually, you wouldn't, for all intents and purposes, you wouldn't be able to go to law school or pass the bar for the most part.
Yeah.
Absent some circumstances. So he goes, okay, if he wants to not be a convicted felon, was offered what's called a withhold of adjudication, which is kind of like a way you're pleading guilty, but not on paper, a convicted felon.
Okay.
He'll have to accept a sentence of 9 months in jail. And at the time, I was, like I said, 23 years old, 22, 23. Had never been to jail, did not want to go to jail. The prospect of being there that long, like I knew that I was in trouble. I knew that I had made mistakes, plural. I knew that I was facing probably some time, but I was thinking more in the range of like 30 days, a couple of weeks. Like I wasn't thinking anywhere near in the realm of 9 months. And also, to kind of put things in perspective, this was around the exact same time that Brock Turner was sentenced. And Brock Turner was if you remember, the Stanford swimmer that was caught sodomizing a girl behind a dumpster. And it wasn't like a question of whether or not he did it. It was he was caught in the act, so we know he did it.
Yeah.
And his sentence, the judge gave him, I believe it was, I want to say 3 months, because the judge said he was a young kid who made a dumb mistake, and he didn't want to irreprehensibly damage his future.
Ugh.
And I remember thinking, I'm getting 3 times what this kid got, and I didn't sodomize anybody. I didn't nowhere near anything like that.
Yeah.
So it was a hard pill to swallow at first, but it ended up being probably, in hindsight, one of the best things for me, because I grew up real quick. I learned a lot, and it gave me a lot of perspective, as you can imagine.
Yeah. Well, so like just you going through that story, obviously, you know, my channel is about accountability, right? And then being able to take self-reflect. And so, man, going through that time, right? Obviously, there's a level of, in your head, maybe you're blaming the cop that arrested you. You're blaming this. You're blaming that. Like, when do you think maybe, I guess, in jail or was it after that you were like, you know what? No, this is my fault. I fucked up.
Absolutely. So you're right. I would say the first month, I was in the, woe is me stage. This is messed up, and there was some reasons for that in addition to it, and that they messed up my paperwork at first, and I was in the wrong pod. I was in the PBL pod for the first 3 months of my stay, which stands for punishable by life, which is the people that are getting ready to go from jail to prison for close to, if not life sentences, for like very violent stuff. So I was in the wrong pod for a while, and that pissed me off. But like I said, I would say for the first month, I was in the very much woe's me. The cop, should have given me a break. The prosecutor was too strict. The judge, if I would have just done this differently, if that, and it was everyone's fault but mine for the first month. Everyone's fault. It was this, it was that, and then I would say around maybe month 2 or 3, when I really started talking with the different men in there, and kind of getting to know them in terms of like their background and what happened with them and in terms of where they came from. And the kind of realization that hit me kind of like a punch in the face was like, how could, and this sounds like I'm making an excuse for them, and I really don't want to sound like it, but once I would hear some of these stories, it's what struck me was, how could anybody expect you to end up anywhere other than here, given the start in life that you had, or given the things in life that you don't have, or given the things that happened to you? I mean, I'm listening to stories about these men that are coming from broken homes, that have one parent, no parent, that they had to take care of 2, 3, 4 siblings, in addition to an ailing aunt, grandparent, or parent, having to be parents to kids that they didn't have, that aren't even necessarily they're related to, because they are kids, that they share like one parent in common, and they were forced into things that they didn't want to have to do because they had to provide, or because they were never actually told, hey, an education is the way to succeed, which it sounds so backwards. It sounds so, how could anybody not know that? How can anybody have any other mindset, but that school, college is the path to success? And a lot of them were fed this false narrative that no matter how hard you try, you're going to be nothing, because you've started as nothing, and our whole family lineage is nothing, or everyone around us is nothing. So when you tell somebody that over and over and over again, they're going to believe it. So I was listening to them, and I was listening to that and hearing all of that, and I go, okay, I understand why you would end up here. Not that it absolves them from the things they did, but how could you end up anywhere else when you have given nothing and been fed this false narrative? And then I looked at myself and I go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I have been taught right from wrong. I had a phenomenal father. He passed away when I was younger, but he instilled phenomenal values in me. I had a mother that was product of divorce, but she worked 3 jobs to try to, put me into good schools. I had a stepmother who we didn't always get along, but always ensured that I was doing the right thing and, not getting in trouble. I was given those things. I was told that education is the way to better yourself. I had all of those things that none of these people had, but yet look, I'm in the exact same place they are. Yeah. What the hell happened? What did I do wrong? Yeah. How did I put myself here when I'm in the exact same place that all of these other people are, given I have so much more than they do? So that's really when it struck me, like, listen, you have so much more, and you need to suck up this pity party bullshit, because they have a reason to sit here and go, this is so unfair. Yeah. You don't. So you need to, all those things that you have that they don't, you need to use at your disposal if you have a second chance to make the most of it. And that's really kind of when I was like, okay, this is a you thing. You put yourself here, despite all of the help that people tried to give you. Was the childhood perfect? Absolutely not. Yeah. But it was like, I wasn't here because of other people. I was here despite other people's help. Yeah. And it was a realization that, okay, once I came to that, it's on you to now fix it.
Yeah. Man, I mean, and that's like the whole birth of this channel too. The individuals that you spoke about, it's like they've been fed a lot of things their whole life too. And I want to be that person that, obviously YouTube's big now and social media is big now. People of all socioeconomics have access to this exposure, right? So it's really given the message that, like, you do have an opportunity to make some of yourself. You do have an opportunity to make different decisions in life that can lead you down a different path, right?
Absolutely.
But honestly, man, what you said is just, I think we forget the blessings that we have because we're just thinking about all these other things, not knowing that in other countries or even just in our own country, there's people that don't have running water.
Yep.
Right. So do you think jail was pretty much rock bottom for you? Is that really where you kind of just feel like?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, man. I mean, I'm sitting there like washing my clothes in a toilet, just looking around. Like I was literally like in a law firm as an intern working like a week ago, and then I'm in a cell, dirty clothes, washing them in a toilet. And like, jail was not fun, man. I mean, there was some shit that went down. Like, I saw people get their heads split open. I saw, people just get demolished. I mean, a good friend of mine that you develop relationships in there, hung himself. I mean, it was not a fun time. It definitely opened up your eyes to there's some terrible shit going on. And like I said, like my child was not perfect. You know, I was a product of divorce. I lost my dad when he was 16. I moved out of my mom's house when I was 16 because we didn't see eye to eye at the time. But I still had a foundation. I still had a lot of things that other people didn't. And that was just like you said in this country, let alone in, you know, you can, you know, always broaden it. Like there's always somebody that has it worse. I mean, that was the biggest takeaway that I got from jail, is that there is always somebody that has it worse. And that's not to say, you know, just because that's not to like, you know, look at somebody who's on the street and walk by them and go, suck it up, asshole, somebody's got it worse in Uganda. It's just, you know, don't dwell on your own pity party too much.
No. What do you think? So in that moment, right, you're washing your clothes, you're seeing things happen around you. What was the thing maybe that you kept saying to yourself? What was the thing that motivated you to say, like, man, when I get out of here, like I'm gonna make something of myself, like, or I'm doing things completely different?
So this goes back to when I was saying that, you know, growing up, that a lot of those, you know, report cards said, you know, great grades but defiant, or great grades but, you know, has listening skills, or insubordinate. A lot of my football coaches or my dad or a lot of people would tell you that one of the best ways to motivate me is to tell me I can't do something. And when I was, you know, talking with the guys there and the guards as well, you know, we would one of the biggest topics that comes up is what you're going to do when you get out, when you're in jail. And there's a range, right? It goes from, you know, I'm gonna eat this, or I'm gonna go talk to this girl, or I'm going to, you know, all these things that I haven't been able to do. And then so that's one aspect of it. And another aspect of it is, you know, what are you going to do like with your life afterwards? Yeah. And, you know, a lot of people say, you know, I'm going to start my business, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to go to school, or I'm going to do that. And eventually one of many nicknames in there was College Boy, because not a lot of guys in there went to college. So they knew that I did, and that what am I going to do with that college degree? And I knew already prior to going to jail that I wanted to go to law school and be a lawyer. Just jail solidified that I wanted to do criminal defense. So lawyers, I would say. And some of them would say that there's no way I'm going to be able to, given the charges and given that I was in jail and all that. And a lot of them were also very, very supportive of it. But all of the guards made it a point to tell me how stupid and how foolish of an idea that was, and what a pipe dream that was. And I didn't, you know, listen to it. But then I got my LSAT books sent to me in jail from a friend, because I was like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start right now. That was one of those, you know, when I was, you know, hit the accountability thing and realized this was all on me, it was like, okay, I need to make the most out of my second chance. And then it kind of was like, wait, you don't need to wait till you get out. You can start right now. You can start right frickin' now. Yep. So I immediately got my book sent to me. I immediately started studying, and I would wake up before everybody, start studying, because once it started getting loud and stuff in there, it was hard to really. And the guards would just come by and they're like, what are you doing? You were wasting your time. You are never going to be a lawyer. Like, that is hilarious that you think you're going to do this. Like, you probably can't even read and write. Like, there's no way. So that fueled me a lot. And then, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong. There was the road to this. A lot of people were extremely supportive, but there was a lot of people that were like, dude, what are you? There is no shot, man. Like, I respect, like, you know, the pipe dream, but you need to get realistic, my man. There is no way this is happening. And that to me, and I appreciate those people. I genuinely do. Like, I'm not one of those like, you know, shout out to my haters thing, but like, I will always be more motivated by somebody telling me you can't than someone telling me rah, I know you can. And I know that's not a great way to be, but it motivates me more. Like, I get more out of negative reinforcement than positive for whatever reason.
Well, bro, you're very similar. Like, that's why we clicked. Like, I think I was always kind of like a class clown. I wasn't really defiant, right, so much, but I was a class clown. And like, me and you have always had leadership qualities. We've always, in college, we had a lot of people that wanted to follow us and things like that. And I think an important person told me, hey, you can use those powers for good, or you can use them for evil.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I think now you've like once you got out, it's like, no, I'm going to use my powers for good and pave the path. Even just sitting down with me, man, and really trying to be open and let people, say, hey, like it's not a straight and narrow to, become the profession that you want to become or become successful. There's bumps along the way. So, and there's some big valleys sometimes that you're going to have to go through. Do you, what advice? So if there was somebody now, someone like us, we're hard-headed.
Sure.
Usually when you're younger, you're not listening to the advice people give you. You shouldn't do this.
Right.
And then you do it anyway.
Right.
So two different scenarios. Someone that maybe was doing some of the risque things that you were doing before you got locked up.
Right.
What advice would you give to that person, and then the person who is just getting out of jail or just got in trouble and they're leaving? Sure. What advice would you give to that person?
Okay. So for the first one, that's in the stage of maybe still young and, living recklessly, for lack of a better word, which I would say check both of the boxes when I was doing that then, it's hard to imagine it now, because like when you're in your 20s, you have such a small sample size of what like your life is, because that's like, you know what I mean? You have like your childhood, and then in your mind, like your life didn't really start until like you maybe like you're 16, 18, and like you really had the independence. But you think that like in that moment that like that time is everything. And the best advice I would say is just try to be forward thinking and future thinking and realizing that, is this like momentary, decision, pleasure, choice that you make, whatever it is, worth like a future or forever of consequences? And it's hard to think about consequences that aren't there, or that aren't that are abstract, that might happen, that aren't right in front of you, or that you're not even facing. But I would say that a little delayed satisfaction goes a long way, and just really try to be think about the future. Just think. Just don't be so impulse driven. I would say consider before you act. That's all. And just be a little bit more trying to prepare for the future than just always living in the moment.
I think that can even apply to every area of life. Finances, impulse spending, so that is great advice.
Yes. And then for the second one, someone who has maybe turned the corner, I would say it would be twofold. Don't think that, you're going to keep failing. Don't think like, oh, I've made it over the big hump and now like it's going to be, all rainbows, and now I'm going to start making the money, and you're going to keep failing. And don't think that because you failed at something once or twice to throw your hands up and think, okay, well then it's just not for me. That's a sign from the universe. That's a sign from God telling me that like I shouldn't have done this, because I could have easily said that, hey, I tried, I did everything I could, I prayed on it, and these are the results I got. Maybe that's the sign saying that this isn't for me. And that's not necessarily true. Failing at something isn't a sign that it's not for you. It's just a sign that, you haven't reached where you're going yet. It's, you know what I mean? It's not a fail. It's an attempt. It's another shot. It's you learning. So don't be afraid to fail. You're going to keep failing, and don't give up on it. If it's something that you really want to do, and you've tried 6 times, well, maybe the 7th is the one.
Yeah.
I know a guy that's on his 5th time taking the bar exam, which is by far the hardest test I've ever taken. I lost 15 pounds while studying for the test.
Jesus.
It was a grueling, ridiculous test that is in no way indicative of how good you are going to be an attorney. It's just they need some metric of deciding who can come in and who can't. And he's failed it 5 times, and he's saying, I'm not out. He goes, I'll fail it 50 times before I quit. And I go, man, I cannot. I'm incredibly inspired by that, because it is a gauntlet of a test. So
how long is it?
3 days.
To take the test?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I thought the SATs was.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Jeez. Well, just expanding upon that, man, it's like, especially if someone has been to jail, right? It's like in society now, and these are those consequences that you talked about from the first scenario. It's you've kind of lost the benefit of the doubt.
Absolutely.
Right? You've lost that benefit
Absolutely.
of the doubt. So now you need to, it's going to take more than words, right? It's going to take action, consistent action.
Absolutely.
Hey, showing up every day.
Yep.
I mean, the pursuit of happiness that Will Smith was there every day, showing up. I want an opportunity. So that's what it's going to take. I mean, but it doesn't mean it's not there for you.
Absolutely.
It means that you're going to have to work that much harder. And so that's why that first piece of advice is so great, because you don't want to get, it's hard enough as it is.
Exactly.
You're going to have to take that same test. Right, but you
Yep.
don't want to close all these doors
Correct.
before you can actually now say, all right, now I have to go through all these hoops and hurdles just to get to the hard goal that already was. So, who is there someone or what do you think is your biggest inspiration or who, maybe in your life or just someone that you've seen growing up?
So definitely, there's a couple. Definitely my father starting out. Immigrant from Trinidad, limited schooling, wasn't allowed to go to college. But I don't know if I ever met another harder working person. Was very, very selfless. Did not really, his life was about providing for us. There was no real, satisfaction for him. Every family vacation we went on, he stayed home and was working or taking care of the house or whatever. Yeah. Every time we, were evacuating for a hurricane, he stayed and was, for the house or batting down the hatches or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Never complained, was never bitter about the circumstances. Even when he had cancer, he was constantly working. He was relentless in his, pursuit to provide for us or to teach and to, be a good father. So him for sure. Had another father-like mentor figure. I said I moved out of my house my mom's house when I was 16, and moved in with a friend of mine whose father also happened to be an attorney. And he was kind of like the first person that made me think I could be an attorney, because it's very important and I never really got this concept of like how important representation was. I never really why you need to see like a black Spider-Man or a black president or a woman, vice president, just being able to see somebody like you in that role. I never really understood. I mean, I got the concept of it. Like, like, I can see it, like maybe me too. But to be clear, my friend's dad is a, short, older white guy that, I otherwise wouldn't really identify with. Yeah. The only reason I did is because his personality, is very, this brash, rough around the edges, very assertive, borderline, abrasive guy. And I was always, my mind of what an attorney was always this, stuffy, nerdy, old white guy that was just, Poindexter, and just to see just a guy that I kind of identified in terms of like, the more, rough aspects of my personality, and him still being successful, made me think, oh, wow. I mean, you can fit that mold and still be an attorney. I didn't know that. I thought you had to be like this or you couldn't be one at all. So seeing that made me think I could definitely be an attorney. And I will say, and this is not because I'm on this show, low key, and this is not gassing you, in college. I will say this. You were an inspiration. And I'll say this because my biggest thing, and I've always said this, that I may not be the smartest person in the room, but I will absolutely always outwork you. I will be the hardest person in the room, no matter what. I don't care what it is. And that just applies to everything. It's this chip on my shoulder mentality that kind of always kind of drove me. And I always thought, listen, nobody works harder than me. And being your roommate, and at the time we both worked a lot. Yep. And I think at the time we were, I'll never forget, we were in this apartment on Tharp Street. And I had 2 jobs at the time. And, I thought, and had a full class schedule. Yep. And I thought, man, there is nobody in the planet that could You know what I mean? I'm about to write a novel about, all these things that I'm going through, and I'm working 2 jobs, and I've got full class schedule, and there's just like, and I see these other losers that mommy and daddy are paying for everything, and it must be nice, and man, I got it so hard. And I look over and I saw you, and this mother has got 4 jobs, 5 jobs, and he's going to and he's full-time class, 4 or 5 jobs, and he's getting a degree in freaking personal training, or a certified in a massage therapy, or another degree in health science. I'm like, what in the Christ? How? And I think I asked you sometime something about like, how are you working that many jobs? And I think you just said, I mean, like, there's 24 hours in a day, man. Like, you can, if it's important enough, you'll make time for it. And I immediately went out and got another job, and I was like, holy shit. And I made it work. And I remember thinking prior to that, 2 jobs in class, there's no way I could do anything else. There's just no way, because, we were rushing fraternity. I think I had an internship, and I was just like, there's no way I couldn't do it. And watching you with, all that, I immediately went out and got another job, and I was like, okay. And that was kind of like another thing that in my head was, you can always work harder. You can. I mean, you may not want to, and don't get me wrong, it's not sustainable to work 5 jobs for that long, but like, it was a grind, and it was in a time where, we were younger, and we had more of the energy, and we had less responsibilities, but we also had less money in our bank account and less food in our stomach. So, we were hungry in every sense of the word.
I appreciate that. I do. So people I've always asked me, like, where do you get your work ethic from? Where does it come from? And I can't really like pinpoint, like, my mom worked hard and sacrificed, but she wasn't like that. My dad was more the hustler, doing different things and whatnot. But he passed when I was 1 year old, man. So I can never like point to, the only thing I can really point to is maybe kind of even just what you were talking about as far as representation, but like, my thing is maybe more exposure, right? And I think that you can kind of relate in this sense, where I didn't grow up well off, right? But my mom made a lot of sacrifices to put me in Hillsborough, New Jersey, which was a very affluent place in New Jersey. So I was exposed, and all my friends, I'm exposed to mansions, to over $1 million homes, and all these other things that maybe someone in maybe the inner city is not exposed to, right? So I was exposed to that at an early age. So I always had a motivation, like, you know what? When I have a wife, when I have kids, I'm gonna be in a house. I'm gonna have a pool. I'm gonna have this, and like, that's maybe the only real thing that I can say, like, you know what? This is where it comes from. But then again, there's people who grew up where I grew up, and they're still at home. So it really is the individual. But I mean, I think that for me, man, it was really like, this is how I envision my life later on. And that's where that work ethic comes from. And I want to keep doing it. And then I want to be the representation that you were talking about, to see someone who looks like me that can do this, and hey, eliminate all the noise and just put your head down and go to work, man.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something I didn't mention, but I think is extremely important in terms of like in terms of like, when I looked at like what I want from my life, like, I set my sights so much higher based on what I was exposed to. And you will set your own ceiling based on like what you see, what everybody else around you can achieve. So you're like, okay, if this is what everybody else is achieving, okay, well then like, I'm going to set my sights here. But if you see everybody else achieving way up here, you're like, okay, well then that's what I want. And then my mom did the same thing. She was always adamant about, we don't have things, but I'm going to put you in a really good school, surrounded by, the best and brightest. And became my friends. You know what I mean? I was around kids that like, they had boats growing up. Like, like their parent had a boat, and then the kid had a boat. And like, I remember I say this all the time. I didn't know I was poor until I went and hung out with my rich friends. And I came back, I was like, yo, why don't we have any of this shit? And they're like, yeah, we're poor. We don't got that stuff. So you want that, you better like, get a good job. And it's something that really did instill in me. I was like, once you are exposed to that, it's hard to go back and be like, okay with this. And I was always okay with it until I saw the other side, and I was like, oh, I want that. You know what I mean? But it took that exposure for me to dare to, shoot for that high once I saw it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I agree with you. If you're not exposed to that, you will set your ceiling much lower based on what you see and what you're exposed to.
Well, it gives you a greater appreciation of the hard work that your parents put in that you have no idea. I remember I went to Disney as a kid, probably coming down from New Jersey, mom with 3 kids, probably every year for 11 years straight. First time me and Jen went to Disney as adults, go get a ticket. It's like 200 something. I'm like, what the hell?
Yep. How did y'all do that with all these kids?
And I'm like,
and food,
dude,
and
the first person I called my mom. I said, hey, Mom, I just want to say thank you. Because you just don't realize it as a kid, man. And that's something I'm trying to like teach my kids now. It's like, it doesn't just grow on trees, right? You have to work for it. But I mean, it just shows the sacrifices that our parents did to have us be exposed and be in that affluent area. And it's like, you know what? I owe it to my family to make some of myself too. Bringing it back just a little bit. I know your pops passed when you were 16. I'm curious. Do you think if your pops never passed that you would have been as defiant as you were as an older, younger but older kid?
Probably not.
Yeah,
probably not.
Because the fear of what could have happened.
I mean, he was so. My girlfriend now likes to say that I don't have like a healthy enough fear, and that because of that it makes me too reckless, and I have like a unrealistic sense of my own mortality is what she'll say. And it's not that. It's just that like my father was, and again, I have for the most part glowing things to say about the man, but was so freaking terrifying to me. Like so terrifying to me that like nothing else really kind of like hits that fear pressure point to me. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. Like I of course like fear things. Like I'm not like I have the emotion. I'm not this like super tough guy. Don't fear like fear. Like absolutely. But it's just in the sliding scale of it. Like he's like of him, the bar was so like everything else is just kind of like a. Well, it's not like there, so like it just it doesn't motivate me as much. But no, I don't think I would have been. Absolutely not. And because he just I was not. I wouldn't have taken these risks because I was doing things in undergrad that was just unnecessarily risky behavior just for the show of it, and it was just what are you doing, man? And it was.
I think I've had some talks with you, man.
Yeah, it was like, what are you doing, man? Like, why are you? And it was. I was dealing with some stuff, losing him, and it should have just been, probably could have been resolved with, opening up and talking and stuff like that, and acknowledging that I had some stuff. But no, I think he would have kept that. I think there's a correlation to the fact that I never really got in trouble with the law prior to him passing.
Well, there's a level of fear. And it also was met with the respect that you had for your dad too.
It was just like letting him down. That was the other thing. Like I say just fear, but it was also just of letting him down. It was just it would have if to him or to me it would have meant all his sacrifices would have been for naught. It would have been for no reason. Or I'm spitting on the sacrifices that he made to put me into these positions, and that fear of the disappointment is I think more than anything, because it's not like I was afraid that he was going to kill me, but I think that would have nipped that in the bud a little bit more.
I the disappointment hits different. Absolutely. Right, when I was a young kid, absolutely. We egged the house, idiots, right? Me and a couple of my friends, and I got read my rights on Mother's Day, and I'm like, just like gut wrench. Like my mom wasn't mad at me. She was just disappointed in me, and it's just like gut wrenching, bro. Because it's like, damn, like how the hell we should be celebrating you today, and I'm getting read my rights. It never been arrested, but yeah, man, it was just crazy, man.
Yeah.
So I want to just jump back a little bit to your profession. the common misconception, public
Yep.
defenders and everything like that. So I just want to ask, so if someone is hiring a defense attorney, right,
Yes.
I'm going to assume being an attorney is like any profession. There's good ones, there's bad ones
Absolutely.
and whatnot. What's something that you can point out that if I came to you and said, hey, Wes, my defense attorney is doing this or saying this, that you would advise you need a new attorney?
Sure.
Is there anything,
Yeah. I would
behavior or
yeah,
anything?
I would say a couple of red flags for any. I would say I'll just say with a criminal defense attorney. Any some big red flags would be any attorney that's guaranteeing you or promising you any result. I don't care on what type of charge it is. I don't care if it's jaywalking, which yes, I have literally gone to trial on a jaywalking charge, believe it or not. Or if it's a murder and anything in between.
Yeah.
If an attorney is saying, I guarantee you I'm going to get you X, or I'm going to get the prosecutor to offer you Y, or to get the case down filed to this, or drop it all. That is a huge red flag because there is never really a guarantee. There's always, I'm going to do my best to get you XYZ result.
Yeah.
But there's oftentimes always so many other variables that are contingent upon you getting that result that are sometimes out of your control. So if any attorney is making you a guarantee or a promise, that is a huge red flag, and I would be very skeptical. Number two, I would say, is any attorney who is, so there's certain.
Well, can I ask you a question
Yeah, sure.
about that, the guaranteeing?
Yeah.
So is that maybe a mechanism that someone that's fresh out, that's just trying to build a name for themselves, that they may use? Or do you think that's just an arrogance that,
Both.
'cause- yeah, okay.
Absolutely both. I
Okay.
think it's people just starting out and like they really need to get clients, or they need to
Got it.
land clientele. They will overpromise to just to make them sign.
Yeah,
On the opposite side of it, there's attorneys who've been practicing for X amount of years and maybe who have a very good relationship with a prosecutor or a judge or what have you, and like they normally get this result on that type of charge. And you know what? 90% of the time, maybe they do.
Yeah.
But there's always certain there's just different variables. It could be how the cop's feeling, how the prosecutor's feeling, how the judge is feeling. That's another thing. There's people involved in every stage of the case, and when there's people involved, it's never going to be perfectly formulaic. The only way you can get something perfectly the same every single time is to have a machine make it out of a conveyor belt. If it's handmade, it's going to be a little bit different every time. There's going to be something that's may not be the same. If the prosecutor woke up that day and is really, really upset about a fight they got in with their husband, and now they got your case, and it looks like the same fact pattern of what happened, with their argument with their husband. Guess what? You're not getting probation that day. You know what I mean? It's just certain things can always influence that. So, but the other older attorneys that have think they are used to getting a lot of results will make promises, and you can't do that with people because people's lives are on the line. In that same vein is if an attorney is pushing you or being overly aggressive and pushing you to make a decision one way or another, that's a red flag. There's certain decisions that are for an attorney to make, and there's certain decisions that are for the client to make. The decision for an attorney to make would be strategic legal decisions about what would go in a motion, when to file a motion, what arguments to be argued in that motion legally. Those would be for an attorney. Whether or not you even want to go a motion route, or if you want to just go straight for a trial, that's your decision. If you want to take a stand or not, that's your decision. If you want to accept a plea or not, that's your decision. If an attorney is asking you what the decision is, it's your decision. If they give you the decision, but it's not really a decision, it's more of like hey, these are your two options, but you'd be a moron if you don't take this one. Or these are the two decisions, and I'm just telling you, like, the other one's not even really a decision. You have to do this. That's not how it should ever be framed. It's my advice. If I was in your shoes, I would maybe do that, but it's totally up to you. This is your life. This is what you should do. That's how it should always be framed to you. They shouldn't be overly pressuring you to do one thing or another. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're charged with murder and the prosecutor's coming to you and saying, hey, we're going to drop it down to a battery, you're going to serve no jail time, and, we'll be able to seal this off your record in a year. I would say, hey, you should really consider this.
Yeah.
You should really consider this.
Yeah.
But if you look at if you go back to your attorney and say, hey, look, I understand what you're telling me, but I absolutely didn't do this. I want my day in court. It's absolutely ridiculous. Then, hey, that's your decision. It should never be overly aggressive trying to make you make a decision one way or another. And again, that's very different from an attorney's side, the decisions they get to make. But if they're coming to you, hey, you should do this or this, then it's your decision. And nobody should overly influence you one way or another.
So in the attorney's shoes, would it be best if they didn't believe that they had a snowball's chance in hell of winning this case to just not take the case? Or
not necessarily, because when you say win, right? Win is a subjective term. Now, win meaning at trial, that's one thing. But you have to remember, and when it comes to criminal cases, 2% go to trial, 2 to 3%. The other 98, 99, 97 are pleading out. So when you say win, well, if you're charged, I'll give you a perfect example of what I would consider a win, but we didn't go to trial. I had a friend very recently, obviously I'm not going to name names, attorney-client privilege, that was arrested for trafficking of fentanyl. Okay. Trafficking of fentanyl carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 7 years in prison, meaning I don't care if you have the best lawyer in the world, there's nothing that the judge would be able to do in terms of going under to sentence you less than 7 years if we were to either take a plea or lose at trial. And it wasn't really a case you could take. You could kind of take any case to trial if you want, but it's not a case I would advise to go to trial in terms of the facts weren't very good, in terms of there wasn't any constitutional issues of when and how they found the substance. However, his argument was, hey, this isn't fentanyl. I don't have fentanyl. I've never been around fentanyl. I don't know why they would say that. He's saying what I was possessing was cocaine, not fentanyl. And that's very different. And the reason it matters is because you have to have 28 grams in the state of Florida in order to be charged with trafficking of cocaine. Anything less than that, and it's simple possession. And there's no mandatory minimum. And we can negotiate a plea, anything from no jail all the way to, whatever the max would be.
Yeah.
As opposed to fentanyl, you only have to have 4 grams in order for it to be considered trafficking. The reason being is because fentanyl has become much more dangerous than cocaine in terms of the fatalities that are involved.
Yeah.
So what I had to do was, and I went to him, I go, listen, what we can do is retest it or ask a lab to retest it and reweigh it. And if it comes back not fentanyl, if it comes back said cocaine, like you're saying, I will argue that they should downfile the charge from trafficking of fentanyl to simple possession, of cocaine. And then from there, we can really negotiate a much better deal. Because if we're stuck in this realm of the trafficking of fentanyl, there's really nothing I can argue. You're getting 7 years.
Yeah.
That's the floor. That's the floor. It can go up from there.
Yeah.
So he goes, listen, send it in. And I had a very frank talk with him. I go, listen, if we don't send it in, I could maybe make some sort of argument and say we don't really know for sure, because the test results were like conclusive but not like confirmatory, if that makes sense. They were like it's indicative of fentanyl but not like a slam dunk. So I was like, listen,
okay, I
could maybe try to make a quasi argument and we could work something out or something. But if I send it in and it's confirmed, there's nothing, man. Like we're doing like we're stuck with what we got. And he goes, I promise, just send it in. So I sent it in. That came back, and it was not fentanyl. It was cocaine, and it wasn't even the amount they said. It was actually significantly less. So it was a simple possession. I think it was maybe a gram or less than a gram of cocaine. So we're in a completely different ballpark now. We have no mandatory minimum. So it went from, he's facing 7 years in prison, and this is a guy who's never been a convicted felon, never had any real charges. He had a little bit of cocaine because him and his girlfriend, they were going to go to a party, whatever, and I was able to negotiate it, and simple possession of cocaine is a felony. I got it negotiated down to possession of paraphernalia, which is a misdemeanor, and then was able to get him a withhold of adjudication. So he got a misdemeanor withhold of adjudication. So he's not even convicted of that misdemeanor. No jail time, no probation, had to pay some fees, fines, and do a drug evaluation course. Wow. So he went from 7 years mandatory minimum to some fines and a drug course and no felony conviction. I would consider that a win. Now, he pled guilty to possession of paraphernalia, which is a misdemeanor.
Yeah.
It's a withhold.
So,
but
I get what
that's
you mean
a
now.
win.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
You know what I mean?
Very subjective.
So,
okay.
No. So, no. There's tons of times where someone comes to me and like, okay, we're not going to be able to take this to trial because your ass is on video doing it. And you have a face tattoo that, says, your name. So we're not going to be able to do that. So we're going to do this instead. We're going to have to, negotiate this. Or there's always a couple of ways you can attack a case. And I would, be wary of any attorney that's telling you otherwise, that's saying, look, there's nothing we can do. There's always something. I mean, it may not be the best shot, but there's always something. I mean, I always say I have, when I was at the public defender's office, like I said before, that very, very few cases go to trial. When you're at the public defender's office, you're in trial all the time. I was at the public defender's office for about 2 years and did over 30 trials. There's a lot of attorneys that never get to 30 trials in their entire career because of just how low cases go to trial. And I say this all the time. There was cases that I should never have won and won. And there was cases that I were slam dunks. I knew I won, and somehow the jury came back guilty. So
wow,
it's you never know what's going to happen with the jury when cases go to trial. That's why oftentimes you know what's going to happen when you take a plea, and that's why it's much more it's much more attractive to take something that you know what's going to happen rather than a dice roll. And I don't say this offensively or rudely, although I know it's going to sound offensive and rude, but it is frightening, the intelligence of the average juror in terms of these are the people that are deciding these people's lives, and it's not the best and brightest that come out. It's just, I would say that.
Well, that's also why you say it's a red flag if anyone's guaranteed that you're gonna get off or this is. So what? Just diving into that, man. What advice or what are some of the things? So if anyone is facing, they're about to get arrested, or what is the common thing that, like, should people always just be silent and just wait for an attorney, or always just ask?
Always,
no matter guilty, innocent. Like,
I would say the only reason, 2 reasons of why you should talk to the police in a situation. If you're the one who called them,
okay,
maybe you could talk to the police, unless you're calling the police on yourself, or if you are absolutely sure. And if you're not sure, then, and if you're unsure, then err on the side of caution. But if you're absolutely sure that you were just a witness, that whatever happened is between these 2 people or these groups of people, and you were in no way, shape, or form involved. But even then, that can still get dicey. And I'll give you a perfect example. A family member of mine called the police because friends of hers got into an argument that got overly heated, and she was just concerned for everybody's safety. When the cops arrived, they very aggressively interviewed, for lack of a better word, my family member who called the police, and basically said, you need to tell us who hit who, what exactly happened. And my family member actually didn't see the incident. They just heard the incident and said, okay, this is sounding a little bit not good. I'm just going to call it in the abundance of caution. Again, my family member was in no way, shape, or form involved in the actual incident. Well, the officer got upset and didn't like that she wasn't answering the questions the way she wanted. They thought she was withholding information. They put her in handcuffs. She didn't end up getting arrested because she started saying that she knows an attorney and that happens to be a public defender and like the office that would be dealing with this case. So they kind of knew that they needed to kind of relax. But she was thrown in handcuffs just because they didn't like that she wasn't answering the questions the way she wanted to. She really she didn't have the information to give them. It wasn't like she was trying to protect one person or the other. She just did not see what happened. She's like, listen, this is what I heard. That's it. I can't tell you if anybody hit anybody or what happened or when or why or whatever. So what I see that happens a lot is that people try to talk their way out of getting in trouble. And you will never. It's not going to happen. You will never, and it will not happen. You will not talk yourself out of it. I don't care. It's not going to, you're not going to be polite enough. You're not going to be able to have a good enough story. They're not going to just say, you know what, you're right. We're sorry. Once the investigation's happening, once it's started, once they're there, like if they had to come out, they're very rarely just going to go back with nothing. Like it's just not how it works at this point.
You're probably not sleeping in your bed tonight.
And you're just not going to be able to talk your way out of it. It's just, and like they're not always going to be super heavy-handed and tell us what the fuck happened. Like we know, like that. Sometimes it's going to be like, hey, listen, we know something happened. We know it wasn't you. Just tell us, your side of what happened so we can help you, so we can just clear this up and like everything will be fine. Mm-hmm. And then you start spilling your guts and it's like, all right, we got you. It's just, I've seen it happen 100,000 times where they come at you with this, hey, I'm just here to help. We can work through this. Look, it looks like it was the other person that was really the one that was involved here. And like, you were taken advantage of, or maybe they forced you to do it or what have you. Just shut up, ask for an attorney, and that's it. Yep. You might spend the night in jail. You might spend, an hour or two in jail or whatever it is. And I know I just told a bunch of reasons of why it was terrible, but nothing horrific is going to happen in a night. Nothing horrific is going to happen in a couple hours. You will survive, and you probably won't even go to jail. You'll probably just stay in the drunk tank or the holding cell.
Yeah.
So just best advice, just shut up. Just don't talk. Don't. And this is a very good piece of advice that I try to give to everybody. If an officer is asking you to do something, it's because they can't do it. It's because they need your permission. If they're saying, may I search your car? It means they can't search your car until you give them permission. If they say, get the hell out of the car, we're searching it. Okay, well, in their mind, whether it's true or not, in their mind, they have probable cause to search the car. And then just get the hell out and just do what they say. And then if they don't, I'll be able to go in and file a motion to suppress and we can legally work out whether or not they had to. But if they're asking you to do something, they're not allowed to do it. If they're saying, can you provide me this? Can you do this? Will you do this? Will you do these exercises? Will you provide this sample? Will you give me a blood sample? Then they're not allowed to do it. And if they're not allowed to do it, it's within your rights to say no. You don't have to just acquiesce to a police officer and I understand a lot of people were taught, police officers are, authority and they're just trying to help you. But again, they're people. There's good people. There's bad people. Good cops. There's bad cops. Some of them are just, and when I say bad, I don't necessarily mean all bad in the sense of like trying to do something nefarious, but some people are like just value or they, are just trying to advance their own career and they're taking a shortcut or they, hey, I got X amount of arrests I need to make in order to become captain. And like, hey, well, this looks shaky, but it's going to go in the arrest column or, whatever it is. So just be on guard. If a cop asks you to do something, you don't have to. And you're not going to talk yourself out of it. You're not.
Good.
You're not.
No, that's sound advice. That's sound advice. I want to ask one other thing, man. Just how do you, because I know people's lives are on the line.
Yep.
Mentally, man, was that tough to kind of, get over? I mean, it must be an emotional roller coaster, especially those cases where it's like slam dunk, you think you're going to win, jury comes back and convicts. Yep. How do you deal with those emotions? Like how do you work through those things?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of hard things about being a public defender. You're very overworked. You're very underpaid. It's often a very thankless job. I remember I had 200 plus clients, and
Jesus,
it was, how could I give every client the attention and hard work that they deserve? It's not possible. And yes, absolutely, it would weigh on me because, everybody likes to think that like, oh, you're representing, guilty people anyway. You're representing criminals anyway. And it's, okay, well, what's a criminal?
Yeah.
Criminal is somebody who broke the law. So what's the difference between my clients and you? They got caught.
Yep.
Because I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the sweetest little grandma, if you're a priest, if you're a police officer.
Yep.
So you have broken a law.
Yep.
You have driven with your seatbelt off. You may have taken something without paying for it, not even realized. You have broken several laws. And that's first and foremost. And that's one. Number two, there are circumstances and reasons for why someone would break a law. Sometimes it's not always they're a bad person. Oftentimes, that's one of the things I learned at the public defender's office is very few of my clients broke the law out of a character deficiency, because they were a bad person. Oftentimes it was out of necessity. Oftentimes it was in response to something somebody else was doing. Oftentimes it was just they were presented with a problem and that was just their way of solving it. It wasn't the best way of solving it. And they obviously if they were probably taught otherwise, they would have, done something else. But that was just, hey, I'm confronted with the problem. Here's how I'm going to solve it. Here's the solution. It was very rarely just a menace to society out here just committing crimes because they're just want to commit crimes. Sure, are those people? Sure. But they were the minority. There was few of those and much more. It was either it was a crime of necessity. It was, they were in situations that they, had to for XYZ reasons. So yeah, it was hard.
Even association though, because if you're just driving and you're with some kids that go out and do something, now you're an accomplice.
Absolutely. So there was so many times where there was people that were on probation and they were in the car with somebody that they didn't even know. Oh shit, man, I'm sorry. Yeah, there was some weed in the car. I didn't know. And it's like, well, you're not allowed to be around people that are committing crimes. And how do you know that? Ahead of time, you're supposed to ask every friend, "Hey, man, you committed any crimes today?" Like that's you're not going to have very many friends very long after that. So no, it weighed on me a lot. It was something that was very difficult. But I will say the one of the things that helped was I lost one time. It wasn't a trial, but it was a motion to I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was the prosecutors arguing to revoke one of my client's bonds, if I'm not mistaken. And it was because there was an alleged violation of a pretrial release condition. I forgot what exactly it was. And he had not been my client for very long. Like he was somebody else's public defender client when he was on the pretrial release. And then in that time, he had violated and then he was switched over to me. So I had barely been with the guy. And didn't really know much about him other than what I had heard from the other attorney. So I prepared for this hearing and I had all this case law and all these arguments, and I didn't really think I was going to win. I thought that there was a low chance that I was going to win because in the particular county that I was in and in front of this particular judge, and because of these particular facts, I was like, it's just historically with when all these things line up, it's not gonna go well. So I argued the motion. I had a lot of arguments that I thought were genuine arguments, and we ended up losing. And they said, we're going to revoke your bond. You're gonna go ahead and take it into custody. And he was about to go to jail. And I walked over to him and I go, look, man, I know you don't know me very long, and you probably think that I kind of just threw this together, but I'm really sorry, and I'm gonna do everything I can to keep fighting on your case to get you out as soon as possible, because I did know that he had a wife and I believe one kid and one on the way, or he had two kids. I can't remember which one it was. And he looked up at me with almost tears in his eyes and just said, "Thank you, man. I really, really appreciate that." And I go, "What do you mean? I just lost." And he goes, "Man, you don't understand. Nobody in my entire life has ever fought for me, ever, has ever stood up for me, ever. And the fact that you just didn't just stand up and say, please don't revoke his bond, and then move on from that, that you really put a presentation together, really means a lot to me." And
Jesus,
that fucking hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, Jesus Christ right now. So when I went back to the office, it was just kind of like a look. I know I can't do the best for everybody, but as long as I know that I'm really fighting as hard as I can for when I can is for as much people as I can, then I know I'm at least putting a drop in the bucket. Am I fixing the criminal justice system? No, but I am at least, ensuring that, we have a good system. And that's a question I get a lot. And it's the way that I'm able to rationalize it. People ask me all the time, like, how do you defend somebody, you know, when you know that's innocent, or excuse me, when you know that's guilty? And it's one thing if you represent somebody that you know is innocent, or that you think's innocent, or that you think, you know, had a good reason for why they did something. But there have been times, more than one time, where I've represented somebody that I know they did it, or I think, and I don't think that an especially great reason for it either. And the reason, or the way I rationalize it, is this: it's not about the client, it's not about the case, it's about the system. I am a public defender, and yes, I am defending your rights, but I'm defending our criminal justice system. I'm defending the fact that if you're going to bring a charge against somebody, you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt with evidence, not just because someone said, I saw you commit a crime, or because somebody said, you know, she's a witch, therefore she's a witch. That's what it used to be, though. That's legitimately what it used to be. It literally, all it took was an accusation and you could die. So I'm defending the fact that if you're going to bring charges against somebody, if you're going to take away somebody's rights, if you're going to try to in any way impede somebody's freedom, you need to come correct. You need to have your evidence, you need to have your facts, you need to have your witnesses, and needs to be presented beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. And if you can't do that, then I'm sorry, you can't get the conviction. It's not like, oh, well, but we know. Well, how many times have we, but we know, and it wasn't the case?
Yep.
Very recently in Broward, and to their credit, the Broward prosecutor's office on their own vacated a man's sentence because he was sentenced to 400 years, which is absolutely a ridiculous sentence. 400 years for a series of robberies. And it was determined that and the only thing, that piece of evidence that essentially was presented that really got the conviction at the trial was a eyewitness testimony, which was later determined by the prosecutor's office to be unreliable. And I mean, correct.
Yeah.
One eyewitness that was determined to be unreliable. And again, they knew, hey, come on, we know that this guy did it. And you know, it was obviously overturned. So there's a saying, you know, people say it's or attorneys say it become a bit of a cliche, but I very believe it's true, that it's, if you can't ensure that the worst among us get a fair trial, then you can never ensure that the best among us get a fair trial. And that is true, because
that's,
you know,
the first thing you said to me.
The people like, you know, the Nicholas Cruzes, right? And I'm bringing up Broward references because, you know, we're in Broward, and if anybody who doesn't know, Nicholas Cruz is the Parkland shooter who shot 17, killed, executed 17 students and faculty in Broward Parkland School. People like him, you know, I would see in comment sections, like on social media, you know, people like him, like, why do we even need a trial? Just take him out back and shoot him. And it's like, I understand where you're coming from. I get that emotion. I understand that. And I'm not going to say that I'm immune from the feeling, but you can't have that mindset for anyone. Because if you set a precedent that, like, oh, well, once we just know and we just decide that they're the bad guy and they don't deserve a trial, like that sliding scale can apply to anybody.
Yeah,
it's
slippery slope.
It's too hard to say, oh, it only applies to these group of people. Well, you can't even do that to the death penalty. Because even the death penalty is only reserved for these group of people that we know are the worst, that we know are guilty, and we execute innocent people all the time. So it's just, we have to, if we can ensure that people that we hate get a fair trial, then we know everybody will. You know what I mean? So that's why we're defending, or that you should want to, you know, do criminal defense. It's not because I have this, you know, fuck authority mindset and I just want to release everybody that's like, oh, you don't like rules, me neither. Let's just like, that's not how it works. I mean, yes, I have a skeptical view of authority and always have. And I think you should ask questions and things like that. But it's just the system. Because otherwise, if we don't have a system like that, then we're Russia, we're North Korea, or we were, Salem, Massachusetts, back then when you could just point at someone and say they're a witch and then you're burning at the stake.
Jesus, man. Well, bro, this has been great. Man, I want to say I'm proud of you, bro. I
appreciate it.
This was really a catch up, man. It shouldn't take this long for us to get together, man. But no, I'm proud of you, man. You've been through a lot of adversity in your life, losing your father, jail, and to see where you've come. out the other end, man, and what you're doing with your career, man. It's amazing. It was very insightful today, really, to just hear the other side of things, because I don't think we hear public defenders talk and seeing it from that other side. We see it from this bird's eye view. So I appreciate you sitting down with me, man.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely happy to be here. And like I said, I was honored that you asked me to, man.
yeah, man. So, well, hey, y'all, go ahead, like and subscribe to the channel. Before I, take you away, Wes, is there anywhere that maybe they can find your firm, or, if someone needs criminal defense?
Yes, absolutely. If anybody in the South Florida area is in trouble, friend, family, anything, please reach out. It's the Rawson Law Firm, Rossen Law Firm. 7 criminal defense attorneys, absolutely the best in South Florida. Our motto is give us a call when something bad happens to good people. So we are more than happy to work on any case. Anyone in South Florida, give us a call.
Yep. And I think, hey, you should take down that information, because you never know when you need a criminal defense attorney.
It's like an umbrella. I always say it's better to have and don't need it than need it not have it.
Absolutely. Well, hey, y'all, again, great talking with you, man. We definitely got to catch up a little bit more often. And to the audience, hey, I'm going to be bringing some more interviews just like this with some insightful value, and then some professions just like Wes, just so that you guys can continue to get value. Go ahead, like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing y'all in the next one. Take care.